The morning sun glinted off the crystal-clear water of Michael Reeves' meticulously maintained backyard pool, the pride and joy he spent 3 years saving for and another 6 months perfecting. The custom stonework patio, the Italian tile surround, and the state-of-the-art filtration system had cost him nearly as much as his first car. But on this particular Saturday in July, as Michael rounded the corner of his house carrying his morning coffee, he froze mid-step, nearly dropping the steaming mug onto the paving stones. "What the hell is going on here?" he muttered, too stunned to raise his voice. His sanctuary had been invaded. Colorful balloons adorned his pergola. Folding tables laden with food and drinks lined one side of the pool. A banner reading "Happy 40th Birthday, Diana," stretched across his outdoor kitchen area. And most jarringly, about 15 strangers, adults sipping mimosas and children splashing in his pool, were making themselves completely at home in his private backyard. Standing in the center of it all, directing a caterer where to place a 3-tier cake, was Diana Holloway, the notoriously difficult president of the Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association. The same woman who had cited Michael 3 times in the past year for infractions as minor as leaving his garbage bin visible from the street for more than 4 hours after collection. "Oh, Michael," Diana called out, waving as if he were a late-arriving guest rather than the bewildered homeowner. "Perfect timing. Could you show Fernando where the outdoor electrical outlets are? We need to set up the margarita machine." Michael blinked, wondering if he was still asleep and caught in some bizarre dream. "Diana," he said carefully, setting his coffee down on a nearby ledge before he could spill it, "why are there people in my backyard?" Diana approached him with the confident stride of someone who had never been told no in her life. At 50-something, she maintained the athletic build of someone half her age and dressed exclusively in tennis whites or luxury athleisure wear, her blonde highlights always freshly done. "It's in the bylaws, Michael," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, though her smile remained fixed. Section 12, paragraph 3 clearly states that all amenities visible from common areas may be utilized for HOA-sanctioned events with proper notice. "This is my private pool," Michael said, still struggling to process the absurdity of the situation. "On my private property, and I never receive any notice." Diana's smile didn't waver. "The notice was included in last month's newsletter, page 4, right after the announcement about the new restrictions on garden gnomes." She patted his arm condescendingly. "You really should read those, Michael. Communication is so important in a community like ours." A splash of water hit Michael's leg as a child cannonballed into the deep end, sending a wave over the edge of the pool. In the distance, you could see his next-door neighbor Rachel peering over the fence, her expression a mix of sympathy and curiosity. "Diana, there's absolutely nothing in any bylaw that allows you to commandeer my private property," Michael said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm going to have to ask everyone to leave. Now." Diana's perfectly maintained smile faltered for just a second before returning with renewed brightness. "Oh, Michael, don't be difficult. Everyone's having such a lovely time. Besides," she leaned in closer, "you wouldn't want to make a scene in front of the HOA board members, would you? Especially after that unfortunate business with your unauthorized garden shed extension." The reference to Michael's ongoing battle with the HOA, a dispute over 6 inches of space that had already cost him thousands in fines and legal consultations, made his blood boil. But as he looked around at the children playing and the guests chatting, he realized that causing a scene would only make him look like the villain. "You have 1 hour," he said through gritted teeth, "and then everyone leaves or I'm calling the police to report trespassing." Diana's eyes hardened even as her smile remained fixed. "That's not very neighborly, Michael. Not very neighborly at all. But fine, we'll speed things up a bit." As she walked away to rejoin her party, Michael pulled out his phone and began taking photos of everything: the unauthorized use of his property, the strangers in his pool, and most importantly, Diana Holloway orchestrating it all. Something told him he was going to need documentation. What he didn't know then was that this invasion was about to spark a neighborhood war that would change Sunnyside Estates forever. The aftermath of Diana's pool party left Michael with more than just a mess to clean up. Empty champagne bottles, scattered napkins, and a thin film of sunscreen coated the surface of his once pristine pool, but it was the muddy footprints across his custom stonework and a cracked Italian tile that truly set his teeth on edge. "This is going to cost at least $1,000 to fix," Michael said, crouching to examine the damage as Rachel, his next-door neighbor, leaned against the fence between their properties. "You should send Diana the bill," Rachel suggested, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. "Though I doubt her royal highness would ever pay it." Michael snorted. Rachel Gardner, a quiet librarian who'd lived in Sunnyside Estates for nearly a decade, had been fighting her own battles with Diana. Her crime? A little free library in her front yard that Diana claimed violated the No Structures bylaw. "I'm done playing nice," Michael said, standing up and brushing off his hands. "I'm going to fight this." "Be careful," Rachel warned. Diana's husband is a lawyer, and half the HOA board are their personal friends. They've driven out 3 homeowners already for challenging them. Michael's jaw tightened. Well, they haven't met me yet. The following Monday, Michael took a personal day from his job as an 8 systems analyst. Armed with the photos from the party and a detailed estimate for the damage repairs, he headed to the county clerk's office. 6 hours, 4 departments, and countless forms later, he emerged with a small stack of papers and a better understanding of property law than he'd ever wanted. That evening, Michael knocked on doors throughout Sunnyside Estates. Some neighbors quickly shut him down, too afraid of HOA retaliation. Others invited him in, sharing their own horror stories of Diana's tyrannical rule, from excessive fines for garbage cans left out too long to threats of liens for unapproved paint colors. By Friday, Michael had collected statements from 12 households and discovered that Diana had been using the HOA's reserve fund to pay for her personal community-building events, including her birthday pool party at Michael's house. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening in the community clubhouse. Michael arrived early, setting up his laptop and connecting it to the projector. As board members and residents filtered in, Diana's eyes narrowed at the sight of him in the front row. "Let's call this meeting to order," Diana announced, tapping her gavel with practiced authority. "First item on the agenda." "Point of order," Michael interrupted, rising to his feet. Several neighbors he'd spoken with shifted nervously in their seats. "I believe residents have the right to address concerns before new business, according to the bylaws you're so fond of citing, Diana." Diana's smile turned glacial. "Fine. You have 3 minutes, Michael." Michael connected his laptop to the projector. "I'll need more than 3 minutes. I'm here to discuss what happened at my home last weekend and the pattern of bylaw abuse by this board." The room fell silent as the first photo appeared on screen, Diana directing caterers around Michael's pool. On July 17th, board president Diana Holloway organized a private birthday party at my residence without my permission. Michael began, his voice steady. When confronted, she claims Section 12, Paragraph 3 of our bylaws permitted this intrusion. He clicked to the next slide, a highlighted copy of the actual bylaw. This section refers exclusively to community-owned common areas and not private property. Furthermore, the notice was buried on page 4 of a newsletter, with no direct communication to me as the affected homeowner. Diana stood up, her face flushed. "This is ridiculous. We've always interpreted the bylaws this way." "That's the problem," Michael continued, undeterred. "I've discovered at least 20 instances in the past year where the board has interpreted bylaws to benefit certain members while punishing others." He clicked through slides documenting selective enforcement, board members with unapproved modifications that went uncited, while regular residents received fines for minor infractions. Murmurs rippled through the audience. "Most concerning," Michael said, pulling up financial records he'd requested from the county, "is that HOA funds were used to pay for what was clearly a private birthday celebration. That's not just a bylaw violation, it's misappropriation of funds." Diana slammed her gavel repeatedly. "This meeting is adjourned. We will not listen to these baseless accusations." Actually, came a new voice from the back. "The meeting can't be adjourned without a motion and second, according to Robert's Rules of Order, which our bylaws specifically adopt." Michael should have known Diana wouldn't go quietly into the night. The first sign of retaliation came just 3 days after the HOA meeting, when he returned home from work to find a neon orange violation notice taped to his front door. Immediate action required. Unapproved landscaping modification, the notice read in bold letters. Beneath it, a $250 fine was listed for removal of approved vegetation without permission. Michael stared at his front yard, confused. Then he spotted it, a small patch of bare earth where a sickly rhododendron had died the previous week. He'd removed the dead plant, intending to replace it that weekend. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, tearing down the notice. By the end of the week, 3 more violation notices appeared, one for a garden hose improperly stored on the side of his house, another for exceeding the permitted grass height by half an inch, and a third for excessive water usage visible as runoff on common sidewalks. He wasn't the only target. Rachel's little free library was suddenly deemed a safety hazard, requiring immediate removal. Elderly Mr. Patel received a violation for his medical mobility scooter being visible on his porch. The Martinez family, who had supported Michael at the meeting, were cited for unauthorized gatherings when their extended family visited for their daughter's quinceañera. "She's trying to make us miserable enough to back down," Rachel said grimly. They were sitting in Michael's living room with 5 other neighbors. An impromptu war council formed in response to Diana's campaign of harassment. "It's what she did to the Thompsons last year before they sold." "Well, I'm not selling and I'm not backing down," Michael said firmly, "but we need to be strategic. Diana knows the bylaws inside and out, and she's using them as weapons." "What we need," said Eleanor Chen, a retired corporate attorney who lived at the end of the block, is to understand where her power actually comes from. HOAs have authority, but they're not above the law. Eleanor had been quietly observing the HOA's activities since moving to Sunnyside Estates 3 years ago. Though Diana had initially tried to recruit her to the board because of her legal background, Eleanor had declined, preferring to maintain her independence. Now her expertise was proving invaluable. "I've been reviewing our HOA's incorporation documents," Eleanor continued, pulling papers from her leather portfolio. "There are some irregularities." Over the next hour, Eleanor explained what she had discovered. The Sunnyside Estates HOA had been established 15 years ago when the subdivision was built. However, the developer had gone bankrupt shortly afterward, leaving several legal requirements unfulfilled. Diana and her husband had stepped in, completing the paperwork themselves and making several modifications in the process. They essentially rewrote sections of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions without proper homeowner approval, Eleanor explained. And they've been amending bylaws through board votes rather than full membership votes as required by state law. "Is that legal?" asked Mr. Patel, leaning forward on his cane. "Not even slightly," Eleanor replied with a thin smile. "But they've been getting away with it because no one has challenged them. Until now." Armed with this information, Michael and his growing coalition of neighbors began a two-pronged attack. On the surface, they meticulously documented every instance of selective enforcement and harassment. Behind the scenes, they built a legal case for invalidating Diana's authority. The investigative committee, formed at the previous meeting, now stacked with Michael's allies after several of Diana's supporters mysteriously found themselves too busy to participate, began reviewing years of financial records. What they uncovered was staggering. "She's been using HOA funds like her personal piggy bank," Michael told Rachel one evening as they sorted through bank statements spread across his dining room table. Pool maintenance billed to homes without pools. Landscaping services charged to the HOA but performed at board members' private residences. And look at this. The community event fund that paid for her birthday party has been used exclusively for events hosted by board members. "We need to take this to the county prosecutor," Rachel suggested, pushing her glasses up nervously. "This looks like actual fraud." "Not yet," Michael cautioned. "Diana's husband still has connections at the county level. We need to build an airtight case first." Their chance came sooner than expected. 2 weeks later, as Michael was photographing yet another violation notice on his door, this one claiming his garbage can emitted offensive odors, he noticed an unfamiliar van parked in Diana's driveway. Workers in uniforms were unloading construction materials. "They're suing us," Michael announced, dropping the thick envelope of legal documents onto Rachel's kitchen table. "All of us." Rachel, Eleanor, and 3 other neighbors who had become the core of the resistance movement stared at the lawsuit as if it might bite. "A defamation lawsuit against 12 named defendants," Eleanor said, adjusting her reading glasses as she skimmed the complaint, "seeking damages of $1.2 million for malicious actions resulting in loss of reputation, undue mental anguish, and interference with HOA operations." "Can they even do that?" asked Rachel, her voice pitched higher than usual. Eleanor's expression was grim. "The HOA itself is suing us with funds from our own dues. Diana's husband filed this through their firm, which means they're not even personally paying the legal costs." It had been 3 weeks since the emergency meeting where Michael had called for a recall vote. The special election had been scheduled, but Diana had found a way to strike back before it could take place. "This is a LAP suit," Eleanor continued, using the legal term for strategic lawsuit against public participation. "It's not designed to win in court. It's meant to intimidate us into silence with the threat of expensive legal proceedings." Michael ran a hand through his hair, which had grown noticeably more gray in the past month. "So what do we do?" "I've already spent most of my savings on the pool repairs and legal research." "We fight back," came a new voice from Rachel's doorway. Everyone turned to see Gabriela Martinez standing there, her teenage daughter Lucia behind her. The Martinez family had been hit hard by Diana's retaliatory fines after supporting Michael, nearly $3,000 worth of violations in less than a month. "My cousin is a reporter at the Tribune," Gabriela continued, stepping into the kitchen. "I gave her everything we have on Diana. The story runs tomorrow." The next morning, the front page of the local section featured the headline, "Neighborhood Tyranny. HOA president accused of financial mismanagement and homeowner assessment." The article detailed Diana's years of selective enforcement, questionable financial decisions, and now the lawsuit against homeowners who dared to question her authority. By noon, 3 more news outlets had picked up the story. By evening, a regional TV station was doing live reports from outside the Sunnyside Estates Community Center, where an emergency town hall had been hastily organized by county officials in response to the growing scandal. The county commissioner, up for re-election that November, spoke gravely about investigating allegations of misconduct and ensuring homeowners' rights are protected. What went unmentioned was that Mark Holloway had been a significant donor to his previous campaign, a fact that Michael had made sure the press was aware of. Diana and Mark were conspicuously absent from the town hall. According to their next-door neighbor, they had left that morning for their lake house 2 counties over to escape the circus, as Diana had put it. In their absence, the resistance flourished. Eleanor presented a detailed legal analysis of how the HOA had overstepped its authority. Michael shared his documentation of selective enforcement. Dozens of homeowners came forward with their own stories of Diana's reign of terror. "What we're seeing here," said the county's consumer protection attorney, who had been dispatched to observe the meeting, "appears to be a pattern of behavior that goes beyond HOA enforcement and into the realm of possible civil rights violations and financial impropriety." The lawsuit against the homeowners was put on hold pending investigation. The recall election was fast-tracked and supervised by county officials to ensure fairness. But Diana had one last card to play. 3 days before the vote, every homeowner in Sunnyside Estates received a glossy, professional-looking brochure in their mailbox. The cover showed a lovely family enjoying their pristine neighborhood with a bold headline, "Protect your PRT values, vote no on the recall." Inside was a dire warning. Without Diana's leadership, the neighborhood would quickly deteriorate. Housing values would plummet as undesirable elements moved in. The carefully maintained aesthetic would be replaced by chaotic individualism, as homeowners were allowed to do whatever they wanted with their properties. The final page featured before and after photos of neighborhoods that had supposedly dissolved their HOAs, showing well-kept communities transforming into rundown eyesores with overgrown lawns, cars on blocks, and garish decorations. "This is absolute garbage," Michael fumed, tossing the brochure onto the growing pile of evidence. "These aren't even real photos. They've been manipulated." "But it's convincing garbage," Rachel pointed out worriedly. "Some of our neighbors are already getting cold feet." The sheriff's deputies weren't there to stop the vote. They were there to serve warrants. Michael, along with everyone else in the community center, watched in stunned silence as the lead deputy approached the check-in table where Mark Holloway sat supervising the polling process in his wife's absence. "Mark Holloway?" the deputy asked, though it was clear he already knew who he was addressing. Mark stood, straightening his tie nervously. "Yes. What's this about?" "We have county permission for this recall vote." The deputy handed him a document. "This isn't about the vote, sir. This is a search warrant for your residence and home office, as well as the HOA office in this building. We also have a warrant for financial records related to the Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association accounts." A collective gasp went through the room. Rachel grabbed Michael's arm, her fingers digging in so tightly he could feel her nails to his shirt sleeve. "What's the meaning of this?" Mark demanded, his lawyer persona taking over as he skimmed the document. "On what grounds?" "Financial fraud, misappropriation of funds, and falsification of corporate records," the deputy replied, his voice carrying in the now silent room. "Your wife is already being questioned downtown." The news spread through Sunnyside Estates like wildfire. By afternoon, everyone knew that Diana had been taken in for questioning. By evening, they learned that the county prosecutor had been building a case for months, triggered by financial irregularities spotted during a routine audit of property tax records. The recall vote continued under the supervision of a county clerk, but it had become almost a formality. The final tally was overwhelming. 87% in favor of removing the current board. 2 days later, the full scope of Diana and Mark's scheme was revealed. For years, they had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, creating fake vendor invoices and skimming from the reserve account. They had also been collecting consulting fees from the landscaping and maintenance companies that held contracts with the HOA, companies that consistently overcharged for their services. Most damning of all, they had used HOA funds to pay for legal services related to their personal real estate investments, including a vacation property that had never been disclosed to the community. "I can't believe it was this bad," Michael said, sitting on Rachel's porch a week after the recall vote. "We were just trying to stop her from being a tyrant. We had no idea she was also a criminal." "Some people just can't handle power," Eleanor commented, sipping her iced tea. "Even a little bit of it." The temporary committee appointed to manage the HOA until proper elections could be held, including Michael, Rachel, Eleanor, and 2 other neighbors who had been active in the resistance, faced a daunting challenge. The HOA's accounts were in disarray, legal bills were mounting, and the community was still deeply divided. "We could just dissolve the whole thing," Rachel suggested during their first official meeting. "Just get rid of the HOA entirely." Michael was tempted. After everything they'd been through, the idea of simply eliminating the source of so much trouble was appealing. But he also remembered the conversations from his backyard gathering, the genuine desire among many residents to maintain some community standards while ensuring fairness. "I think we need to reform it, not eliminate it," he said finally. But we need to rebuild it from the ground up with total transparency and real democratic input. Over the next 3 months, that's exactly what they did. Every homeowner was invited to participate in drafting new bylaws. Town halls were held to discuss which rules were actually important to the community and which were just vehicles for control. Financial processes were completely overhauled with professional accounting oversight and regular audits. The new HOA was a far cry from Diana's regime. Architectural reviews were conducted by a rotating committee of residents, not a fixed board. Fines were replaced with mediation for most violations. Board positions were limited to 2-year terms, with no member allowed to serve more than 4 years total. Most importantly, the culture changed. The focus shifted from enforcement to community building. The same energy that had fueled the resistance was now channeled into positive initiatives, neighborhood cleanup days, community gardens, and social events that